Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear us. I'm just waiting for Philip to come in. I know that he's just phoned me just to sort of say that he was there. So he should be on in just a sec. If not, I'm going to re-invite him. So just a minute. But thank you all very, very much for joining. And great that you're all here. Do use the chat. Thank you very much, Anne, for kicking the chat off. And congratulations as well for making it through. I think that lots of you had problems getting my emails today, for which I profusely apologize. But thank you all very much for coming. If you can't hear me, just throw away through the chat. Do use it. When we get to the end, it should be the Q&A, which we'd love you all to be joining. Just a couple of general sort of comments. You don't absolutely have to have the chocolate tonight, because really what the aim of it is to learn a lot about Philip, who's just amazing. And I will be sending him much more compliments when he arrives, but I've learned a ton from Philip about craft chocolate. He was one of the first people who really sort of got me into it. And I'm hugely honored that he's talking to us. And I think you'll discover that he's got loads of stuff to talk about and loads of stuff to say. Not just about craft chocolate, but about life and environmentalism and everything else in general. You do, however, need, well, it would be really great if you've got the chocolate, if you've also got a phone, because one of the things that we at Cocoa Runners and at Original Beans are very, very keen about is getting you to articulate about the flavors of chocolate that you will be trying. And we're very fortunate to have developed in your boxes, in the lovely boxes that you've got, you should have a sheet which basically gives you all the bars of chocolate, and it's roughly in the, and it is actually in the order that we're going to taste them, with one slight exception for something we're going to start with. And then the other issue is this great craft chocolate wave, which we're going to ask you to basically use to help you articulate what it is and how it is that you enjoy different chocolates and what sensations you get from. And I am just going to see if we've got Philip. Let me just have a quick look. I've just been on another Zoom with him, so he should be on it in just a sec. Okay. Philip, I've got you now. Brilliant. The miracles of modern technology.
Great.
Fantastic. Okay. So I'm going to kick off by actually just basically sharing a large screen with you, which is going to be a series of slides that we're going to be using to show you various pictures from Philip's life, pictures of various chocolate bars, but above all, impressions as to the flavors of the bars that Philip and we have chosen for you to have a go at. So here you go. Hopefully you can all see that. Is that right? Can you all see the big screen? Philip, can you see the screen? That's the main thing.
I can see the screen. Excellent. Totally.
Fantastic. Great. Okay, so let me just explain to everybody a little bit about what we're going to do today. And I'm going to do the first part as quickly as I possibly can. So look, first of all, Philip, I don't know if you could hear me earlier on, but I was basically singing your praises and saying just how incredibly grateful I am to you, because you were actually the very first time when we launched Cocoa Runners, it was you were behind us. Original Beans was behind us. And I just thought, you know, I've sort of definitely done the right thing. But since then, you've been brilliant. You've taught us loads of things. As we will discover later on, Philip and I slightly disagree on some things about organic, but basically he is one of the great heroes of not just craft chocolate making, but also craft chocolate sourcing and beans and environmentalism. And as I said to everybody before, if you have a second phone, a second device, please have it to hand. We're going to be using something called Mentimeter. And in fact, we're actually going to kick off with something called Mentimeter. So the very first thing, just to get you all warmed up in how to use it, are some questions, which we will explain to you. So if you can go to menti.com, and basically, we just want a simple question from you. There should be more and more of you joining, but just basically just go menti.com. This is just as a warm up, and just basically just tell us when have you most recently eaten chocolate? Okay. This is much better. We're expecting, so basically, if this is an average British audience, just to put it in context, 25% of Brits eat chocolate every day, and 75% of us eat it every week. If any of you have not eaten chocolate within the last month, well done. And thank you very much for coming, because it means that we have a good chance to convert you to the delights of craft chocolate. But anyway, this is just a warm up. So let's just try the next chocolate. So here's a quick question for you. Given that, how much we spend in the UK, what do you think we basically spend most on? What do you think we spend most money on? Yes, we're getting this one right. You are indeed right. It is indeed chocolate. So you're away. No. You were doing much better. Look, we spend as much on chocolate as we do in the UK, at least. I don't know what it is for Germany or what it is for Holland or even Switzerland, as we do on published books and recorded music. It's just staggering. And most of what we eat, bluntly, is not particularly good. But what we are here to do today is not just chat to Philip, but to give you to taste some amazing chocolate bars. So that's one of the highlights that you will get from today. So the very first thing we want to do, just because we want to get everybody on the same page, and Philip's going to be helping us with this, is I'd love you all, please, to pick this chocolate, if you've got it, which is the standout Urumba beans, beans which are grown in Peru, which Philip's going to talk more about later. But at the moment, I just want to basically
just to get the valley. It's a valley. It's the valley where the Incas built Machu Picchu. So Urubamba Valley.
Right. And just take a small piece of it. One of the great things, by the way, about this chocolate is that the packaging, even though it's not by original beans, is still very environmentally friendly. It's terrible if you take it into a cinema, though, as you can hear, because it makes a terrible noise. So but I don't want you to eat it yet, okay? There is a way of eating chocolate, which basically it's a bit like wine, this swirling around stuff. So what we want you to do with chocolate is the first thing is just look at it and just basically snap it. And you should get a very nice snap, which means it's been properly tempered. And then as Philip is doing, you should sniff it. But this is what we don't want you normally doing with chocolate, but we're just going to get you to do today just for a slight game, is I need to use this, but you can just use your fingers. But basically, I want you just to basically hold your nose. Philip, you have to hold your nose and then grab a small bit of chocolate, put it on your tongue, and just let it melt. And we're going to sit here for a little bit until Philip goes blue in the face. But we're not going to basically...
It's already happening.
It's already happening. But you can actually carry on talking and doing other things once you get used to it.
All right.
But then once it's melted a bit,
I'm not getting
what I want you to do is release your nose. And we're going to discover one of the magics of craft chocolate.
Oh, there it comes.
There it is. Taste versus flavor. Wow. Everybody just remember, savor craft chocolate. Because taste is what you get on your tongue and in your mouth, different receptors. Flavor is olfactory. And the great thing about chocolate is, especially great chocolate made by people like Original Beans, is that if it's properly tempered, it will melt and release all the aromas. So you not just get orthonasal sniffing, but you also get retronasal. It's your olfactory center which is doing all this. It's the magic of cocoa butter.
But Spencer, do we need to do that now, all of us, before we eat chocolate?
Yeah. But let's do one other quick game with chocolate. Again, this time I want everybody to eat the chocolate literally within 3 seconds. And then just quickly go back to Menti. Finish. Everybody should have finished. Put your hands up. I can't see you, but you know what I get to. Basically, just finish it. And just quickly put any words up that you can use just to describe it. None. Excellent. That's exactly what we want. All right. Now, basically smooth. You might get a little bit, but basically, I'm hoping you're saying complete waste of time. Why did you make me do this? Fruity, I think you probably had it in there too long. Acid, I'll accept. Burnt caramel. No. Okay, we're going to stop. Right. The next thing I want you to do is to grab a sheet of paper which has got the wave on it. So first and foremost, I'm going to give thanks to this wave. So Rebecca Palmer, who's an amazing wine buyer, an amazing palate at Corny & Barry, who helped us develop this. James Hoffman, the coffee guy, who sells lots of Philipp Kauffmann's amazing bars in his shop and also makes hot chocolate in it. He's basically a world barista champion, runs Proof Rock Coffee and also Square Mile. And then finally, Professor Barry Smith. What we asked them to do with this, and by the way, now you can take another small piece of the chocolate and just suck it and just taste it. Because when you taste chocolate, especially fine chocolate like the stuff you're going to get from Philip, we want you to go on a wave and really think about it as surfing. So before the wave hits you, you've got a bit of texture, you've got a bit of sort of power and froth coming at you. And then as it hits you, you sort of get this burst of flavors and textures and tastes, which just really come all over you and just work brilliantly. And then finally, afterwards, you get, and again, thanks to Rebecca for this, it's what in wine they call blick, balance, length, intensity, complexity. you get all sorts of aftertaste, different mouthfeels, different textures, different, things like astringency, and often very different flavors. But first and foremost, as you're tasting that chocolate, we want you to basically think about what's happening as you go on this discovery process. So now you've got a chance to savor the standout chocolate from the valley that Philip was talking about. What we'd love you to basically do is just describe it to us. So in terms of texture, is it silky? Is it like satin? Is it like velvet? And then as the flavor comes through, use the words here, because a lot of us are really good at describing the fact that Philip's, for example, wearing a black shirt today. We can all use colors to describe things. We can all use, the language which people basically use for describing music, loud, or the rhythm, the beat, the pitch, the frequency, etc. With flavor and taste, we're really not as good. We often sort of find that there's something on the tip of our tongue, but we can't quite identify what it is. So to help you, we've put together this crib sheet. We're not auto-suggesting it, but it's another reason actually why tasting is great fun done together, because if you can compare notes, it's amazing. But often people are really embarrassed to sort of share what they're doing or what they're not being able to perceive. So it's a bit like sort of exercise in a gym. One of the great things about doing a tasting at home, we think, is that you should have absolutely no embarrassment. You should just say whatever you think and learn from everybody else around you. You don't have to worry about it. It's only Philip and I who are on screen, sort of looking a bit frightened and everything else. But you get the idea. So just relax, enjoy it, but do share the sensations, because the act of articulation is really important. Right, enough. Let's go to Philip. Philip, so the first chocolate bar we now want you to go for. And the aim of this is, as we go through, Philip's going to tell us about different bits of his life. I've got a list of questions here as long as my arm to ask him about. But what we want you to do is, for each section of his life, and this is basically where Philip was born, we want you to have the Nicaraguan chocolate. And he's going to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to prompt him with lots of embarrassing questions, about basically why we're showing you this picture from the National Park Königssee, Germany. Because Philip, your great-grandfather, about 7 or 8 generations ago, is the man behind this. So tell us a bit more about your background and your growing, while everybody's basically enjoying their Nicaraguan milk chocolate from just across the border.
So, Spencer, first of all, thanks for the introduction and warm-up of us all. I feel pretty warmed up. And I want to salute to Coco Runs and Spencer for inviting us all, and to you at home. I've got some bubbles here just to make it a nice evening. Whatever you have, enjoy it. So we'll talk a little bit about myself. That's the format that Spencer suggested. It may be embarrassing to me, but that I think is the point somehow. So yes, this is and I've chosen the images of the first part of our talk together for 1 hour. And this is the one I wanted to start with. It's indeed a national park in the southern part of Germany, and my great grandfather founded it, really, in 1917. He was a conservationist. He was a forester, a professor of botany at the University of Munich, and he was really into preserving nature. And this is one of the first national parks in Germany. And together with this national park, he also constituted a organization that's one of the big conservation or nature conservation organizations in Germany. And you will see mountains and forests and the beauty of nature in quite a number of the slides. And of course, we've translated this back to chocolate. But why I invite you now to, well, we're talking about it, to taste the Josef Zotter chocolate, is because Zotter comes from this area. Just behind those mountains is where the Zotter factory is set. And in our southern German dialect, the Austrian dialect as well, he would be called Sepp, which is the nickname for Josef. And I think he's an amazing inspiration, chocolate maker, just a wild man, and he loves nature. He's totally into fighting with the meat industry. And so this really, to me, represents much of the motif behind my work for many years. You'll hear more about it. And it also tells about the heritage. Sort of, there's a genetic disposition in the fact that there are 7 generations before me. I'm the 7th, 6 generations before me that have all done this kind of work in my father's lineage, all about forestry. The first one in the late 18th century, head of Prussian forestry, and writing a book about forest management. And essentially, defining the word sustainability as something where we are in the current generation asked to manage this land in a way that future generations have the same benefit from it. So this really is the start of our journey, and also my start of the journey into my life, because I was born in this region. I spent lots of time in the mountains. In the winter I was skiing. This is how I grew up, and this is also what I really see when I go to tropical countries and look at the forests there, and that's how passionate origin is. So let's get to the next slide.
Yeah. So the reason why we picked this one, Philip, is because, basically you were sort of talking about, as a kid, hotels were not your thing, were they? Your dad was basically,
that's it,
staying in farms, doing everything else.
That's right.
But your dad also has a fascinating history. I mean, just quickly, because I find it extraordinary that, that he's not he himself was a refugee.
Correct. So my dad passed away last year, and so to see this image and speak about him is quite something for me. He had a complex history, and part of that complexity in a German setting is that the name Kauffmann is of Jewish ancestry, and my father was born to my grandfather, who was Jewish, and ultimately killed by the Nazis in 1944. So my grandfather was a landowner with lots of forests, and my dad really grew up to manage those forests, as generous as before. And in 1944, in the Totale Krieg, the Nazis one day arrived and picked up my grandmother, my grandfather, and my grandfather never returned, and my grandmother went to jail, and 4 months later came home, and overnight picked up her youngest son. The others were gone, and flew essentially back to her family in Munich. And so my dad has always felt in his life, he became ultimately, I think he was destined to become a forester, but he became a doctor. And in his life, he committed himself to serving people. And when he was retired, he traveled to Cambodia and to Yemen and to Mongolia to be a doctor there, to help people. I think he never cared about possession, never about power. He was director of hospital, but he was totally non-material. He was all about, this is the kind of image I see, the sort of, this, doing something with the simplest things. And when I was 5-6 years old, he decided we were not going to go hotels or, I don't know, Robinson clubs, whatever. We were going to go to a farm in summer holidays, and we picked a farm, and we stayed there every summer for all my life. Literally, the old farmers were from pre-industrial era, so they knew really to bake bread and all of this. So that theme of doing a lot with little is something that I find in our work. And in a way, frankly, I think of chocolate as something, where less is more. So it's a theme that just runs through my veins. I grew up. My mom came from an Austrian family, and they were geologists and explorers. So in our house, there were all these pieces from Africa and from New Zealand and so forth. So the big world and nature, those were the two themes in many ways that I grew up with, and that brings us to the next slide, I think,
which is just
that's all the flavors.
So let's talk about the flavors. Maybe while we do this, you and I should just chat about this superstar of the chocolate world, Joseph Zotter, one of your neighbors across the road. He's a great hero of yours because of, he is not only really cracked it in the sense of having this amazing experience that you can all go to, but also organic. I mean, you and I often disagree about organic, but I'm, the two people who always prove to me that I'm talking rubbish about organic, at least some of the time, are you and he. So tell us a bit about Joseph, and of course, his wonderful daughter Julia.
Yeah, and well, he created craft chocolate before there was anything like craft chocolate. He's a chocolatier, and a bigger than life kind of person. Really bigger than life kind of person. He's
Truly, 6'6".
Exactly, serious man.
Big guy.
Yeah,
don't get into an argument with him.
Yeah, but he became a chocolatier. I mean, he inherited that, and then, but he's not bound by by too much convention. And so he created an amazing, innovative chocolate blend at that day. I don't know the exact year, but it was before 2005 or something, 2000 probably, with extraordinary recipes. And I know I tasted a few years ago, he made wood burned chocolate. So he literally burned wood and then infused that and put that into chocolate. So you can taste, burned wood in your chocolate. But in addition, he's an activist. He's a real activist for sustainability, more in his regional context. So he didn't really discover cacao for himself in this way. His daughter is now doing that, but he has about 150,000, 200,000 people visiting his factory, which is a great entertainment sort of part. And he created the living zoo, and essentially you go in there and there's a board that says, don't take your dog in it, because no animal that is in the zoo will ever come out here alive. Essentially, these animals are then being butchered and made into meat. And he is trying to educate 150, 200,000 people a year on, the ilks of the meat industry by showing them what, the value of animals is and so forth. So he's just amazing. His catalog is, I think we have 10 SKUs. I think he has 10,000 or something.
I must admit, trying to keep him in stock is an effort. I mean, in fact, this is a very new bar that I just was desperate to taste, so I put it in for that reason. I don't even know if you can still get it. I mean, I'm afraid. I think maybe when we've got through it, we may have gone it. But it's a great example of his Nicaraguan chocolate. Right, we should move on and describe your basic school, and we're going to basically do India, because I know that before you went to SOAS, came to London, wrote a book about jazz. What you did was you basically decided to take off with not a lot, go around the Middle East, end up in Israel, and then end up almost losing your life in the Benares, sorry, bitten by a dog. And sort of like, but while we're doing that, just to sort of, avoid some palpitations, what we're going to get you to do now is basically try a milk chocolate. I've got the milk chocolate, I don't know if you've got the dark chocolate, but basically it's from India, Soclet. And we're going to talk a bit about Nepal now, but just want to go back to India?
Yeah,
go back. Anyway, you all need the Indian bar.
Chillum. Yeah, so go back to the Chillum. Yes. I mean, we're talking about drugs. We're into drugs. We're now into chocolate, which is a drug. And this was my literally first 6 hours in India. I probably with all this heritage and seeing all the big world and so, and I was 18. I finished school early, and then I needed to take off. And there was the first stop I had to make was in Israel. So I hitchhiked to Greece, and then by boat to Israel, because I needed to figure out my, Jewish, German heritage, and spent 3 months or so in the kibbutz, which helped me a lot, talking to people who had been in the concentration camps, and, just figuring out what that means, because all of them had sort of the same, of course, in the first generation. I was just, but that sort of, that split of identity, being German and having this, so it helped me a lot. And my uncle actually married to a family, is Indian artist, living in Germany. I grew up with him, and so India always rang a bell, and I decided to travel there. And literally, I landed in Bombay, then Mumbai, and then you go from the airport through the slums in the morning, and then I went to the first temple. I think it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and this was my first impression of India, and I just loved it. I just loved the colorfulness and such a different world. So it's drawn me a couple of times in my life to India, and I still, when I see this image, I can just smile. It's just so cool. It's really enjoying. I mean, this is really, texture and melt and everything right there. So let's go to the other slide, which is, a travel slide. You talked about the dog in Benares. I traveled for a year. I was 18, 19. I certainly looked like 14. And nothing happened to me. People were only nice. I didn't have money, so I slept on train stations and on rooftops and outside. And people invited me in their houses. And the only things that really bad, the only bad things that was me, the nature guy. It was nature. So the first thing was that in Benares a dog bit me, and I thought I'm gonna die because this dog is infected. And unfortunately, I didn't die. But the second thing is here up, and I saw this picture, and really this is the scene. I was up in Lantang, which is towards the Tibetan border. It's 4,000 meters high, and walking up there, and this looks like, to me, coming from the Alpine mountains, this looks like a cow. So I know you just pass by, and then you walk, you continue. Just, I underestimated how wild these animals are. And it was a mother with a young, and she looked at me exactly like on this photo, and then she ran towards me, and butch, full on the chest. I flew, I don't know, 10 meters. There were 2 ribs broken, everything blew. But here's the catch. You look at these horns, and she didn't touch me with the horns. She just wanted me to get off, out of her space. If she just had moved her head slightly tilted, I would have had a horn in my thing. So, I look at this with respect and gratitude, really, for having having passed this adventure so lightly. And then I traveled to China and all sorts of places that I visit later. There will be an image of a young Zhejiang. So
we're going to talk more about China and your
exactly.
places everywhere else in a sec.
Yeah. So India, how does it taste?
Let's go. So I just wanted to check that everybody sort of got fruity. Excellent. So Soclet are an amazing Indian company. They actually it's a brother-in-law and a brother who sort of basically get together. Doesn't melt. I mean, look, the great thing is that there are lots of parts of the world now who are not just growing cacao, but actually starting to make it too. So, if I compare this to the stuff that Phillip crafts out of Felkland, it's not going to have the same temper, but it's really interesting. It's really good fun. It's sort of,
I agree.
It's just,
it's fun. It's good fun. I think.
And it has the wave. I really think it has the wave.
Yeah, it's good. Exactly. I think the wave is beautiful, and good fun is also. It's good and it's fun.
Okay, so we've got lots and lots and lots to talk about, and we haven't even mentioned Greece and Yugoslavia yet, which is one of the places we've got to. But what we're next going to do is basically, you get back to Europe and you're meditating for quite a long time. Wow. I'm just going to do this very quickly. Before we get on to Jane Goodall, we all ought to know that one of the things which Philip is very modest about is that he's also an extremely famous author. He came to basically study development economics in the UK, studied it there, and wrote a book about jazz because he was that good a student. Is that right? Or am I sort of misconstruing all this?
Yeah, you're missing that totally. I was just hanging out.
You were basically in bars.
I was just hanging out in bars. I happen to love jazz. I played music, flute and saxophone, and so I played jazz. But I really hung out in bars, and since since that was a lasting impression, I thought that it's actually interesting to write an anthropology about jazz and looking at jazz as something. I've been to India, and so many cultures and so many places have their own groove, and really jazz is this particular groove. It's like something that we have now with the chocolates. You feel groovy about something, either you like it or you don't.
And with the groovy mechanic, the next groovy thing you do is you go to Amsterdam, you set up an internet startup well before everybody else gets into it.
Oh, that's right.
Do you stop on web browser?
I googled in preparation. I thought, should I pull up Netscape? And I thought, nobody knows Netscape. Anyway, the first
we all do know Netscape. We all use the browser.
Right, yeah.
Safari.
Yeah.
Anyway, then get back in the bug.
Exactly, and the internet world had a lot of promises. It was totally fascinating, and the business was very interesting in some ways. But it didn't connect with my heart. So essentially, after 3.5 years, I stepped out. I had 2 partners. I could leave the company, but one evening I realized I would not want to spend an evening, having dinner and a chat with the people I spent my daily work with and our customers. And so that's, for me, this is a guiding light. It's like, okay, whom do I want to spend my time with? And so I had the chance to step away, take half a year to sort of collect myself, and there was already nature and doing something for the greater good was already here, and really Jane is to me one of the great heroes. I had the privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela once during a dinner, and I think she's in the same league. She's the voice of nature on our planet. And when, if you ever have a chance to, I think she's 84. If you ever have a chance to listen to her, you should, even on videos. But she is
all on podcasts.
She has that. I think Greta probably also has that. It's like, and Nelson Mandela for sure had this. She's hard to the bone, tough to the bone, but with such a gracious, generous heart and spirit for all humanity. In her case, for all kind. And that's what I love. I hope she gets the Peace Nobel Prize soon, while she still lives. Anyway, I had the chance to speak to her. She took time, and she inspired me essentially to commit to what I'm still doing in my definition, back to my roots, nature conservation. And this is a park that is the oldest. This is a chocolate that comes from a park. It's the oldest national park in Africa. The theme of national parks. My parents were there 20 years before I was for the first time. It's called Virunga, and it was one of our first origins. In 2009, I think we imported the first beans from there, and it has grown from a few dozen farmers to, and 400 kilos was the first, to now I think 6,000 tons of cacao.
And it's an awesome chocolate. That's the one. It's so awesome that we've only given you a small amount.
Yeah.
I want you to come back and buy the whole bar, but no.
Our sales team said there's not much. This is not such a good deal.
I think this is a great deal because we use this for all of our tastings. Anybody's been to one of our normal virtual tasting scales. But actually, just on the Jane Goodall thing, I mean, before I'd even talked to you, Philip, and sort of realized what an influence she was on you, actually, one of the best podcasts I listened to this year was the one with Tim Ferriss and her. And she has this sort of great quote, the greatest danger to our future is apathy. And I think, one of the great things about craft chocolate and what you do with it is that we can have a great time and not be apathetic about it. So anyway, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Taste this bar, everybody. Tell us a bit more about really what it is.
Second person I met in this in-between period to get myself sort of focused on, the rest of my career and committing to, protecting nature, the balance between economy and ecology. I met an amazing entrepreneur and author and environmentalist called Paul Hawken, and one of his first best-selling books, and he's written more, and you should Google him up and read all of them, but is The Ecology of Commerce. And in 1993 he wrote something that I'd like to read now, because it's my motif. It's always been my inspiration. I'm not there. It's a benchmark, but here goes. To create an enduring society, we will need a system of commerce and production where each and every act is inherently sustainable and restorative. Just as every act in an industrial society leads to environmental degradation regardless of intention, we must design a system where the opposite is true, where doing good is like falling off a log, where the natural, everyday acts of work and life accumulate into a better world as matter of course, not as matter of conscious altruism. And this is a beautiful motif for any business. And I think it is, in many ways, at least that's how I see craft chocolate. It is a motif for craft chocolate. Is this, you do something good and you don't do it with conscious altruism. You do it effectively by just doing yourself a favor and eating better chocolate. And Spencer, I mean, it's the reason why you're in this. It's a win-win. We just roll up. So this is Paul, and Paul has become a mentor to me and a friend, that we traveled, and so it's a great guy.
And he was definitely one of the people who put you on your route, which we're going to talk more about in a sec. But we'd love everybody just to tell us what an amazing chocolate this is, because it is just awesome. And again, I think starting with the texture is just amazing. I mean, I'm not on, but for me, it's Morello cherries. And by the way, anyone who's drinking a glass of red wine, I envy you, because this is an amazing chocolate to have with red wine. Actually, by the way, everybody, one of the things which Philip and I differ on is that Philip insists that you can drink champagne and white wine with chocolate, and I am completely baffled by this. For me, it's red wine, and occasionally he has actually found some white wines and some chocolates which work quite well. And it's not just sort of ones we're going to have at the end, like the Edelweiss with sweet wines. But in general, I think this is, to me, if you've got this chocolate, grab, a nice heavy red, a nice Shiraz from Australia, a good Bordeaux, good Tempranillo, and it'll just be amazing.
I surrender.
You don't have to surrender.
I'm still for bubbles, but hey.
No, I think actually, honestly, I mean, the more people who know about wine, as opposed to me, who talk about it, there are some people who are convinced that we can do it. And Rebecca Palmer, I think maybe on this, she's managed to do it a few times with this. But I think so. We'll give it another go. Right, let's keep on moving because it is just an amazing chocolate. Right. So more in the environmentalism,
Of course, there's more environmentalism. That's just what you signed up for today. There's
no, I think we signed up for some great chocolate.
Yeah. So I decided to work for the environmental movement. Had the chance to work for World Wildlife Fund. Started to work for the World Wildlife Fund, and really this is about an experience I had, which is literally a 25 million year event. Only happens in usually geological time every 25 million years, which is the extinction of a species. In this case, the extinction of a mammalian species. There's only, in our time horizon, every 25 million extinction of a mammal. And this is the Yangtze River dolphin. It's one of the river dolphins. The big rivers all have dolphins. The Amazon has, the Ganges has, Indus has. And they all look the same. They can't see much because troubled waters are in the rivers, but they have these sensory systems in the radar, and so they can navigate very, very well. And I worked at WWF in a couple of regions across the world, traveled a lot. One was the Yangtze, and I was there in the period where essentially the scientists, this species got officially declared extinct in 2005, but of course before we already knew it was gone. And the reason for it is the other side of our needs, is in this case energy. The Three Gorges Dam, which is the largest dam in the world. And I think, if we talked about Virunga, there's a great Netflix documentary called Virunga. You see these two souls and these two sides in our souls and in our presence, and we just have to find a way to peace, or a way to a better balance, or a way to whatever, a clearer trade-off. But for me, this was one of the shocking moments gone. The film is called Virunga. You can just find it on Netflix. So, I moved from WF to the UN, and I actually didn't work in the UN building in New York here in front. I worked in the Chrysler building. My office was in the Chrysler building in the back, which is, I think, the most beautiful building in New York. Anyway, this is about 2005, and 2005. I don't know if any of you know or remember. Was the first climate conference in Quebec, in Canada, first COP as they called it. And I was there, and it was already then a big conference. And, following this conference, also in my department, the UN, everything about climate was already there. Everybody knew about it. We had the data, there was a representation. I mean, now everybody of us should know, or we know more, but back then it was already clear also among policymakers and industrial people and so forth. And I just felt, I was sitting there in this huge conference and all these presentations, and everybody flying in, flying out. I thought, it's not me. It's not, I need to have it concrete. I need to count trees. I want to see forests, but this is the thing. And so I just, it took me another 3 years to figure out what and how and why. And then ultimately, yeah, chocolate is it. It really, I still believe it's one of the most vicious industries, crazy enough, shittiest products, and it has such a promise. It can be one of the leaders, and I think that's just worth investing in, and on the way having fun and adventure and all of that. So how do you regard to the Pura?
I'm hoping that the volume, we're trying to address a volume issue at the moment, so sorry, that's the reason I was looking a bit distant. If you can let me know in the chat as to whether or not now Philip and I are roughly at the same volume, that would be great. I apologize if we weren't. Anyway, we're now going to talk about, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to let Philip talk more because he's much more interesting. So basically, what we're going to try and do now, Philip, is you're going to tell us about basically when you really start getting in there.
Yeah, exactly. This was it. I was still at the UN. I had sort of a position to finance companies that did really cool stuff at the frontier in the Galapagos Islands, in Mozambique, in Cameroon and so forth. And there was also a project in the north of Peru, in the province Piura, which sort of looked interesting. There was a cooperative that was small but pretty interesting in terms of structure and organization, and they had mangoes. And so there was, question, could we finance or look at this? And I traveled there with a colleague who's still in the chocolate business. I wasn't there. Pierre Chua, who's vintage plantations chocolate in New Jersey, New York. I was in New York, so he's a cool guy, really great guy, and he knew a lot. And so we went there because the farmers at the same time had also pinged us that there may be some interesting cacao. And so we talked to the mango farmers with meetings for a day, and then we went to 3 small fields, and with a little bit of cacao. And Pierrick, like, he went pale. He looked at it and said, "Whoa, I've never seen anything like this. You've been for years in cacao. I've never seen anything like this." And we tasted it, and it was clear this is something special. And for me, there was a sort of a mental light bulb. Hey, actually, cacao is something that is of nature, is natural, it grows in forests, but it's actually cultivated. You get the best of food in many ways, and you get the best of natural environments. And so this stuck. And a few years later, when I started Original Beans, this was one of the first supply chains. Virunga was, and Bedi was, and this one. And if you go to the next slide, I think we have one slide, or we first taste and then actually this is there were 3 fields, probably less than 2 hectares of cacao when in 2008 sort of we started, and now there are hundreds of hectares, and a whole cacao culture has grown in this region. And I just think of this, the farmer incomes have tripled, and everybody is conscious of their heritage. And I think this is such an amazing example of imagine there's a wine region that doesn't even know it's a wine region. Suddenly there's an identity, and there's craftsmanship, and there's all this commitment, there's economic opportunity. So I think this is a great symbol. Somebody put this up, probably a local mayor, I don't know who put it up, but this is the local cacao. It's called Piura Blanco, and the chocolate you're tasting has what flavors, textures, and taste. It's the pink one, of course, the Piura.
I mean, it's an extraordinary time, because you're getting into chocolate. I mean, we now all know Gran Blanco, we all know Piura, but this is basically before
this would have been extinct. This cacao itself is now award-winning, and every better chocolate company has made a bar with Valrhona, Amadei, Pacari, everybody goes there, and but there was nothing, and there was rice farms, and rice is ecologically and economically a disaster. So it really has changed lots. What is interesting, I think, about this chocolate compared to the Virunga, not only the flavors but the timing, because you talked about the waves, and the wave of this one is totally different than the wave of the others before it. It sort of starts different, and then the stringency, or the acidity comes up, and suddenly it changes its character. So there's the story in time is different.
And I think for us, the wonderful thing about comparing these bars is that everybody accepts that a Pinot Noir is going to taste different from a Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah.
But people just don't think about this with chocolate. So whenever we do a chocolate tasting and we're trying to explain, what a difference different cacao varietals make, or what a difference different fermentations make, this is it. I mean, nobody would, these Vera and you and Veltlin craft these extraordinary chocolates, but actually, the textures are pretty similar in many ways. What the real difference is actually the beans and the fermentations.
That's it. We always say it's about 70% of the quality, or 75% of the quality is really on farm, which then, in contrast to what farmers actually get, of course, explains why the product is so shitty. If growers are not paid for all the tough work they are doing, of course you get a shitty product, which is what we know as confectionery. And then,
well, if they're only going to get paid for volume, I mean, the problem is that if you treat cocoa as just another commodity like sugar or palm oil, and you just use it as a vector for flavor, that's what's going to happen. And that's part of what I think the problem for chocolate is. Anyway,
we're going up the mountains. We're still in Peru. We go up the mountains, and 4,000 meters. Suddenly, I don't know if any of you have been to Cusco. If not, I suggest you do. Urubamba, that's where we started the conversation. Urubamba Valley is where the Incas built Machu Picchu. The air gets thin, and let's move to the next slide. Because this is the time when
this is the Oktoberfest.
This is well, I don't.
I do.
Yeah. It's so Nikki is the woman of my life and of my dreams, and mother of 2 children, and my wife, and I told you, I won't tell anybody else that, I needed 3 liters of beer on the Oktoberfest to finally make a move. I mean, it's not really very...
It's very romantic. Anyway,
no, it's not romantic. I don't think so. But here's a funny story about this image. we were on a trip in Peru, actually to Cusco, and on the sort of flight out, we learned that Nikki was pregnant with our first son, Charlie, and we come up, to 4,000 meters. And of course, that was really exciting, the whole thing. And, sort of she got a bit tense, and we had to go to the gynecologist in Cusco. And she went in there and said, I'm expecting a baby, and we're at 4,000 meters, what do I need to do? And he looked at her and said, hey, we're getting babies here as well, so you chill. It's fine, I'm a gynecologist, we get babies here as well. So anyway, that was our trip. I proposed to her in the Amazon, and it was a great trip, and she's a great partner.
Great kids.
Woman. Yeah.
Now,
Chuncho,
Georgia Ramon.
So yeah, I mean, you go Tasty. Georgia Ramon is a small German craft manufacturer. Georg Bernardini and his wife. He's known in the craft chocolate movement for writing these kind of books about all the chocolate makers in the world. And then his first edition was this size, the second edition this size, third edition by now it's this size. And they've also become great chocolate makers. And this is our
Koppener.
Yeah, he was the chocolatier at Koppener, so he really knows his stuff. He's German, he's a bit dry, but he really he knows what he's talking about, and he's a customer of our beans. So what you now will taste is not our Chuncho Cusco 100. It's a 100% recipe, but to Chuncho interpretations like jazz. They get the bean from us, and then they make their chocolates. And I'm super proud about both chocolates and, of course, also the bean. And this is the cacao. There's always these, if any of you ever, had conversations with people about organic agriculture or, better agriculture, and there's always this thing about, but only industrial agriculture will feed the world. And in cacao or chocolate business, you have the same, only industrial hybrids and, genetically engineered stuff with pesticides will really create harvest volume. And you look at this tree, and it's a native cacao tree. It's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, the tree probably not, but this type of tree. And the volume of crop on this tree is just amazing. This is an old Chuncho tree, and this is one of the mother trees we then use to replant, because you can see this has a great productivity, and at the same time it's a native old tree varietal. And next slide. And then this is pretty interesting. There are scientists, and not a few, just in recent years, we've learned a lot about the diversity of cacaos and how interesting that diversity is, how many cacaos there are, and how we can use them as original beans. And this is a study about the flavor diversity. It's called unique pulp sensory profiles found in 2012 in 100 farmers' preferred chunchu trees. So the local farmers, their preferred trees in La Convención province in Cusco, Peru. So in the home province of the chunchu trees, these are farmers that have had it and probably inherited from their fathers. And these are the sensory traits. And you can see what a diversity of flavor are in just this, cacao varietal.
Are they detecting this post-fermentation or pre-fermentation?
This is post-fermentation. This is post-fermentation. But I think you would probably detect it in the fruit flesh pre-fermentation as well. I mean, of course, sensory.
What are they using to detect it? Mass gas spectrometry, or how are they detecting these different flavor profiles?
It's sensory. So this is purely what the farmers. This is qualitative research. It's like what the farmers say they taste, and what like a wine, like a vineyard, like a wine grower. It's like, okay, my grape has this expression. This is what I'm trying. This is also, of course, what they are looking for. So they will select in this direction if they are into lily flavors, and they will probably try to enhance it in the next generation of trees. So anyway,
are these amazing. Different varietals as well?
No, it's not. It's so, I mean, cacao hybridizes very quickly, which is why industrial cacao is such a danger to the homogeneity, to the stock of old cacaos. But you can still group them phenotypically. So if you look at the bean and the pod and so forth, and the tree, it would look similarly. But below that, under the hood, they're probably slightly different. But it's one of the oldest, one of the most flavorful cacaos, and probably in the two chocolates. Now you're tasting the first one, we go to that, and then we go to the second one. You will detect that difference, or
although there is a bit of a difference in maker style, I think, too, between,
of course,
Ramona and what Georges do, and what you get from
all right,
what we get from Frederick Martinson when we go to his interpretation of the same beans. But yeah, I mean, to me, one of the most fascinating things with cacao is that it's such a new subject. There's so little work actually done on it, and in wine's case, that they haven't cracked it, but they're definitely they really understand the impact of different grapes,
and they know everything. They measure, they know how many days of sunshine and rain and what kind of soil. And I mean, we're talking about the poorest people in the world. We're talking about the most remote. There's just nothing there yet. There's so much to develop.
And also they graft, I mean, when they to plant a vineyard, you'll mainly graft. I mean, I'm going to get corrected because I probably got this stuff wrong afterwards. But whereas with cacao, as you sort of say, one of the great problems is that it is incredibly promiscuous. It just picks up whatever's around. But
you graft cacao as well, so you can graft it. I mean, most
mass-produced cacao is grafted, but a lot of wild cacao. The danger to it is that if it picks up some CCN 51, it's gone.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Let's go back to our coffee friend.
That was Marmite. I saw Marmite there. This is interesting. I do think there's.
I get a little bit of toastiness from this chocolate.
Yeah, definitely. George, there's some earthiness. I mean, it's a mountain cacao. It's very high compared to all other cacaos. So I'm sure the soil, the rocks, they filter in this. So there is something about sort of very earthy, minerally. I don't know, whatever you can describe it with. Yeah. So let's go to the next one.
Right.
Which is the standard. It's the same bean, same. They now call it
very similar percentage.
Very similar percentage. Let's open it, taste it.
And again, the advice here is do not take this into the cinema or to the theatre because it's extremely noisy. Although it is environmentally very friendly.
I really think it's a great chocolate. I like, so you sort of asked me the question, sort of, what's a great cacao, and so we talked about terroir and genetics, and that's the base of a great cacao. And of course, the next one is great. It's great. No, go. No, sorry. Back to the other slide. Is great growers. And this is a hand from a grower in Virunga. So it's not Cusco, but the Cusco growers are doing the same. But I like this because we're talking about some of the poorest, disenfranchised people in the world, used to, just not used to any privileges or acknowledgement or whatever. And this gentleman has about 2 hectares. He's of cacao, and he's growing this with his son. And I don't know whether you see it, but he puts a wooden stick under each fruit in his cacao garden to prevent mold between the pod and the stem, because cacao grows on the stem. So if it gets heavy, it sort of hangs against the stem. And if you know what that mold is, one of the big features of standard cacao, like, the big features. This is tropics, it's wet, if this thing doesn't get dry. And so mold is throughout confectionery. Cacao and chocolate is just a big issue in terms of taste and whatever. But, this is, to me, this is craftsmanship. It starts, you get a great varietal, and then you have great farmers with, the eye for detail and all this extra work. I mean, and all the way through. I mean, all the way through to, in fact, you who now take all that effort and the extra work to really taste, what this gentleman and his colleagues put into. All right, next one. And then what our contribution to this is that we of course, we supporting all of this. We're financing it, we're training it, we're honoring it. We do all we can to find the best cacaos, to empower the farmers, to make the best product. And then we have set up 10 principles of a sort of benchmark standards, the first craft cacao standard, because we think the bean is so important. It's what we call original beans. It's called sourced as original beans. It's a benchmark. And the principles are rare cacaos, direct trades, make the best product, produce it pure and natural, least ingredients, preserve rare nature, protect the climate, eliminate waste, track and measure what you're doing, be specific, certify, in our case, organic, whether Spencer likes it or not, and then improve and include others, because it's a supply chain. Everybody who pretends to be Marcolini, I'm not saying that Marcolini pretends to be, but sort of, comes out and says, I'm Marcolini and this is my chocolate, which is sort of a traditional way of presenting chocolate, is lying about the fact that there's hundreds of people who make this product what it is, a long supply chain. So, everybody needs to put in their work, and if you want to improve, you have together improve all, at all levels. So that's what we bring to it. Let's move on. And then we, for great cacaos, we rate them. We have the source stamp, and what you see is here we have these principles: source rare, trade directly, make the best product, and when we literally rate. So the Cusco gets 85% of 100 points, 85 points in our compliance rating for the standard. And some may be higher, some may be lower. We're trying to sort of move in the direction, you can already see this, where coffee is, where you rate coffees according, to their quality criteria. All right, next one.
Although one of the things about that, I mean, actually, while people are just describing what they're tasting, we should maybe pick up on that point about, coffee does have Q grading, because one of the great challenges of craft chocolate, of course, is that we don't have a definition. It's not like craft beer. It's not like coffee, which is actually, it's just the Q grading. But the Q grading, I think, is very different to what you're proposing, because Q grading is basically a bunch of independent people blind testing twice the same beans made into a coffee. Whereas I think you're actually a bit more holistic in what you're trying to do. And I personally am pretty skeptical about the cocoa liquor approach, which is sort of the chocolate's equivalent to cocoa grading, because actually it doesn't really, the difference is that actually if you have a coffee on the farm, actually you can see what it's going to taste like. Coffee liquor just doesn't work the same way. But it is. I mean, I have to say, I think Frederick is an amazing chocolate maker, and he comes out of the coffee industry. Actually, he was originally a mechanic, and then he got into making advent calendars.
What I find interesting, I see the, you know, all your inputs in, and you probably also see this, you know, but I mean, you can see that the descriptors are different. The character, I don't see anything, you know, like we had in a second ago.
No, with George, I mean, we can go back just to sort of.
No, but you know,
you got a few. You got the citrus.
Yeah, the citrus. Yeah, that's right.
I think the roast is slightly.
The Marmite, I didn't see. The savory part, I didn't see here so much.
No, I mean, this is much brighter. It's a lighter roast.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the interesting things that he does is he does actually basically copy the coffee industry extensively, and actually he talks to you about how he's roasted it and everything else that he's done with it, and he basically, you know, makes suggestions. He tries to give you a taste profile, etc. Which I think is actually sort of quite cool and quite good. Right, we've got to rush on because
we rush.
What to talk about.
We rush. So now we go into milk, and of course, there's always a challenge if you go from dark to milk, because now the milk is relatively sweet. It's still, our Esmeralda is still 42% cacao, but you know, there's more sugar. There's the milk sugar, so you get to a sweeter dimension. And in the sweetness, I think it's like with sweet wines, the question is about the balance between sweet and something else. So probably you want to take 2 pieces of this until you get settled into the sweet story. Yeah, I just show you what it means. You know, our slogan is taste the rare, which is what we're doing, and then preserve it. And this is really what changed in Ecuador from the 1960s to 2018. The green is forest, and the green remaining on the right side is forest. And of course, our role as a conservation business, as you know, regenerative business, as Paul described it, is going into what still remains and defending it and making sure that it's preserved. So this is called the national park is called Machachindul. You go to the next slide. And this is the cacao, these are the cacao gardens. And if you show this to any botanist, or you show it to biologists, or you know, they probably would hardly recognize that this is actually agriculture. This is not wild forest. This is agriculture, and this is the wonder of cacao. You can grow analog forests, and this is the way you get the best cacao. So it's a win-win-win that we repeat over and over. You know, we talk about it over and over again. It's this, you know, beautiful, lush terroir that you get. And now we dare to put this into a milk chocolate with lots of sugar, but the original Arriba cacao and its terroir still has it. Here's because I wanted to just spend a moment while you taste the sweetness and the balance and the caramel. Probably you'll get to that, but you know, about measuring impact. And if you talk about regenerative, then it's a discipline. You have to show what you're talking about. And what is amazing, if you saw this forest, then one of the cool things about the chocolate you're just eating is that it actually, from this forest, it all the way through to packaging, transport, it's carbon negative, which means you eating this chocolate heals the climate. It's a climate solution. You eating chocolate is a climate solution. If you build the supply chain in the right way, it's measured here. You see the light green shows you, you know, the climate income through the farming. Then the red one is the cost of production, transportation, packaging, everything, all the way to cocoa runners. And then the climate balance is negative because we want to take CO2 out of the climate, but it's in climate positive. That's good for the climate. Same for farmers. You know, if you pay farmers differently, the 2 lower graphs show the international cacao price, and then the fair trade price on top of it. It moves with the commodity price. And what we do is, you know, we stick a price, we give security, we give long-term security at double the fair trade price. And then farmers actually, from their marginal income, have a living income. They can become specialists. They can focus on, they can rely on their income. They can, just like you and I, start having a job that they can become really good in. And then, you know, and whatever, we call it fair plus because it's, but I think the word fair is not really the best word. And then of course, if you go all the way through the chain, waste is a big thing, so our packaging is compostable, and we just launched for couvertures the first compostable packaging in the industry. These are just, and then you have to measure it. You have to show that it's not talk that's cheap. It's like you're doing it, and of course it costs time, and that again costs including everybody. All right, we go next slide.
While we do this though, I want to just sort of pick up on, for me, one of the key points, which is that the great thing about craft chocolate, the great thing about what you've done is, to me, in that middle slide, which is basically give farmers enough. I mean, the average cocoa farmer gets paid less than $1 a day in Africa. They need $2 to $3. The way they have to deal with this is they have to cut down more forest, they have to use their kids. It's pretty grim. But I think the root cause of it is treating chocolate as a commodity, just like you treat palm oil or sugar, and you're basically just using it for confectionery. And I think we're going to talk in the next chocolate a little bit more about the problems with the addictive nature of sugar for chocolate as opposed to caffeine for coffee. But I think here, one of the things I want to pick up is, one of the things that is great about craft chocolate is that it celebrates the bean. It gets you to taste it in a different way.
That's it.
So the interesting thing about this chocolate to me is that this to me is, the genius of Daniel Peter and Nestle in making milk chocolate is that they basically spotted 100 years before Moscovitz what he did for Pringles, which is, if you have a milk chocolate, you basically, just as when you have a Pringle, once you pop, you can't stop. Milk chocolates are basically, and we'll come back to this in just a sec. Hold on, it's just basically, they're about this. They're about bliss points. And this is, I think, part of the problem with lots of chocolate, which I think yours doesn't do. So even though you've got everybody to probably eat the whole of this lovely, delicious, amazing mini bar, despite the fact that, that you told them, despite the fact that you told them just to sort of get into it and encourage them a bit, I think that even though it is a bliss point food, whereas with these, you probably still savor them a bit. I think that what's important is that you can still focus in on the flavor. And that gives you a chance to actually at least justify the price. Because if you're just growing commodity cacao where all the flavoring is about the added ingredients, you've got a real problem. Now, so this is the reason why, much as I love the idea of organic, I actually think that what you do, which is by focusing on the flavor of the cacao, is so much more important. So I'll give you a chance to sort of breathe back on that one. See what everybody says.
I was ready for the punch.
There you go. So you can have a go back. Do you want people to taste your?
Hey, we can go to the white and we talk about organic, because this white is an organic, and if you would make it without organic ingredients, you would get a much different product.
Right.
So now we go white, which is essentially when if you read the 40% cacao content, it actually means 40% cacao butter. There are no solids in this in white chocolate. The technique is a Dutch. It's a Dutch technique where essentially in the mid 18th century they learned how to press the beans, so the 50% butter and 50% solids get sort of pressed into powder and butter, and then you can re-engineer them, which is very handy for the Mars bars and so forth. They have powder, and then they might even have other, fats other than cacao butter, and the cacao butter gets sold off into cosmetics and so forth. But in white chocolate, you use the cacao butter, and then you use milk powder, in this case, and sugar. So it's like a cookie dough. And one of the truths about non-organic cacao butter is that at current, there is hardly any non-organic cacao butter that's traceable. And that means that most likely non-organic cacao butter, which is at least 50% of what is in non-organic chocolate, comes from West Africa. And West Africa, for all of you, is the Bangladesh. Is West Africa to chocolate is what Bangladesh is to the fashion industry. It's it's the hub. It's where they make most of the product, and it's the big problem. And so non-traceable cacao butter from West Africa is really a liability for everybody involved, including us as consumers. And organic prevents that. Organic Yeah.
I'm going to come back on the organic, but just before I made a mistake. We've made a mistake. Philip, actually, we have a different bar from you. We've got something which you're now calling on this one, the Una 37%, which I think actually is the same as the
same. It's the same. We changed it. You have an old photo. So go.
Yeah, we do. So that's our fault. But
we changed the.
We
changed the butter content in the recipe, and we renamed into the Una Valley, which is where it comes from, in order to align it with our other products. So it's the same. It's slightly changed, but the 3% butter you won't hardly.
But we're delighted that it's back, and I'm really delighted to hear that you made me making full-size bars of it again.
Yes.
Anyway, but I think, look, I mean, the interesting thing about this is that, if you go back in history, so the great thing about the Dutch is they did invent the cocoa press, but the brilliant thing about the Brits is that they worked out how to use the cocoa press to make chocolate bars, and that's when chocolate really starts to take off.
Yes,
when
right.
Lindt
Correct. Yes.
figures out how to make smooth chocolate, and then Nestle and Daniel Peter work out how to grind it and conch it rather with the milk powder. But it's the first product which is like a Pringle where we start to eat it, but that turns it into a commodity. So to me, the organic bit, yes, it's great that this is organic, but fundamentally that's not going to solve the farmers' problems.
I don't agree with you at all. So this is where we get into, of course, it changes everything. The moment you have traceability, it changes everything, because you
didn't say you don't have to have traceability. I just said you don't need organic.
But organic is the legal standard for traceability. There is no other legal standard for traceability. There's a batch traceability from farm to final product in every organic product, and for all the ingredients. So not just for the cacao but the milk, the sugar, everything in an organic bar needs to be 100% organic, and you can paper trail it back to where it comes from. Whether that's written on the product or not is another story, but it's there, and it will be controlled, which means it's the only mechanism that allows us as consumers, and by the way, anybody who wants to check it back.
All right, so I'm going to make
now
and then you've got your counterpunch. Here's my counterpunch to yours. This is coffee, right? Yeah. Now, coffee has done amazingly with basically the idea of specialty, the idea of Q grading, and also just very clear labeling and great reputations. And they've basically done not very much what you've done here. Sorry, I'm picking up the wrong one, but what?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's fine. I get it, but I don't.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that I don't think organic's good. Like I think organic's great, but I don't.
I think there's a bad rep of organic in the UK. I can
Yeah, by that.
Yes. Which is unfortunate, because I think you're coming from a very strong market perception in terms of organic is industrial, organic is not as, it doesn't give me the same product quality, even though there's a traceability, but what the heck. And I don't agree. I think that currently in craft cacao, that's why we set up the craft cacao standard. The craft makers often do not sufficiently know the supply chain to guarantee the integrity of their product. I don't want to suggest anything bad. That I only know really ethical and craftsmanship craft makers, but it's a long chain. So if you're busy with your product right here, you might not know where it comes from. And organic is a standard that allows you to paper check that. It's just guaranteed. So this is a help, and it includes any other product, any other ingredient you would add. So I hope that you don't get, which I'm not saying that organic is all. I'm saying and in our practice with farmers, it helps us a lot to organize farmers. It's like it's a bookkeeping. On farm, you have to keep books on criteria. You have to say, okay, I have so many trees. This is how I composted. This is, what I did, and so forth. So suddenly you get knowledge, you get self-reflection, you get discussion, you get something very different among farmers in the way to approach product. And, again, it's not the end all kind of idea, but it's an important system, I think.
So I'm going to propose a compromise, because
this is good.
One thing you've actually convinced me for is, and we're going to talk about sugar very quickly, and then we're going to move into questions, and we're going to have a
yeah. Let's do the sugar thing.
Where you really nailed it for me was when the last time we had this debate. You basically said, well, what about the sugar? Because in chocolate or the milk, that can be 30 to 50% of the chocolate. So you're absolutely right. But to me, the most important thing is actually the middle chart you've got here, which is we've got to get people to pay the right price for chocolate, fair price for chocolate.
Totally
that comes from not treating it as a commodity, which is,
correct.
Bluntly, organic bananas are a commodity. They're just
of course. There's industrial organic, and organic can be a commodity. I agree with you that you never get to that price level. I totally agree.
So I think what we should do is, do you want to talk a bit about sugar, or just quickly? I think you've got an amazing perspective about sugar. What I'm going to invite everybody to do is pile into Menti, because we're about to have a quiz. And I think, Philip, you should just quickly just explain.
Well, I mean, we have had a journey of different drugs. So we started with the champagne or the red wine, whatever, and then we went into the Chilon, which is the Indian drug. But essentially, we tasted for part of our tasting, largest part. We tasted cacao, but we also experienced cacao, which is a very, very powerful, nutritious seed with a number of drug effects, like coffee. It does have caffeine, it has theobromine, it has serotonin. It's got a lot of chemicals. It's very complex chemical structures, and so the high is cacao high. When we eat craft chocolate, when we eat dark chocolate, we have the sensory experience, and we have cacao as a high. The moment we move to an ingredient list where sugar is the first one, the high is a very different high. It's physiological, it's a sugar high. And our experience of confectionery is the sugar rush in the afternoon. And we know, this is not healthy, it makes us grumpy, it goes up and down. So it's not the high I really enjoy. And alone on that, if we reflect that, the weaning of sugar addiction is probably something we should just all. And I have a friend here, one of my neighbors, who's sugar trader, and he talks about that at length. The supply chain of sugar is not as bad as cacao. Cacao is really shitty. It's like a feudal industry that suppresses farmers and keeps them in poverty or has never raised them. Sugar is not that bad. It's much bigger industry. The landowners are big industry owners. But his point is that the sugar problem is how deeply ingrained the interests of sugar are in our politics and food politics in our society. It's everywhere. So you have to track it. And the confectionery chocolate is nothing but sugar that's called chocolate. Look at the ingredient list. You get served sugar and you think it's chocolate. It's not. So this is the one my
We're in violent agreement on this one. We are in absolute agreement.
Great.
We are in absolute agreement. Look at the label and make certain that you haven't got too much sugar in it.
Yeah,
but anyway, let's go for Menti. And basically we're going to ask a bunch of questions, some of which we've given you answers to, some of which, if you've been to a normal Cocoa Runners Welcome to the Revolution tasting, you'll have got the answers to, and some of which we'll just have fun with. So let's get going. Right. Hopefully it's going to work. So this is just to test your general knowledge. Cocoa grows 0 to 20 degrees of the equator, needs rainforests. Wine is 28 to 52 degrees.
Which of the following countries grows both wine and
cocoa? America, by the way, would meet this criteria because of Hawaii and Guantanamo Bay. Right, let's see what everybody said. Very well done, everybody. Australia. We obviously have a very well. I'm afraid to everybody who says Chile, you're right about the wine, but you're wrong about the chocolate. It's too far south.
Yes.
Anyway, we come to another tasting to find out more.
This is fun.
Yeah. Now, here you go. This is back on one of Philip's favorites. Which product contains the most added sugar? Chuncho 100%, Femme de Virunga 55%, OB, or a small pot of low-fat vanilla yogurt? It is indeed the low-fat vanilla yogurt.
This is depressing. I mean, this makes the point about sugar. It's ingrained. You really, if you want to track it, it's unbelievable.
Well, interestingly, actually,
low-fat yogurt.
In added sugar terms, actually, probably the Femme, the 55%, because it's got quite a lot of milk in it.
Could be. But anyway, I mean,
No, I don't. I think it's actually probably about the same as the Virunga.
Yeah.
I don't think there'll be a huge amount more added sugar. I think the Femme and the dark will probably be about the same. Right. Next question. And by the way, please do start using the Q&A rather than the chat from now on for questions. How much water does it take to grow a chocolate bar? I owe this fact to Philip. 30 to 50 litres, 100 to 200 litres, 800 to 1,000, or 1,500 to 2,000. Philip, what's the answer?
The answer is nearly 2,000 liters. But here's what I have to say about it. This is it's a tropical tree, so it is used to getting water and lots of humidity in its forest habitat. So as long as we keep the forest, it's totally natural. It doesn't cost any water. Literally, it's just part of the natural cycle of this tree. The moment we cut down the trees and we grow cacao, as we do as the industry does in West Africa in full sun, then you have to irrigate, and then suddenly you are down to these immense amounts of water. In production, we don't use any water. Fat and water doesn't go, so we don't use any water. There's no water anywhere. This is all in growing cacao, and so the whole thing is about keeping the forests. So that water cost is just part of the natural cycle.
But anyway, but basically this is a lot of baths, because a bath is like 50 to 80 liters of water. So just when you eat a piece of rubbish chocolate, just realize what you're doing. Right. So this is your great chef.
This is great. This is one of the greatest chefs in the world. And, he essentially, when I met him first, he said, I don't do chocolate. I don't like, I don't think it's interesting. I could convince him that it is interesting. And then what did he use it for? Yeah, exactly.
Sausages. By the way, the history of mole, we should come to our craft chocolate cooking virtual tasting, and we'll give you the history of mole, because it's not what everybody thinks it is.
Yeah, but he used it in a sausage, which of course tasted great. Next one.
Right. Butyric acid. I'll tell you what butyric acid is in a minute, but basically, which one's it in? Parmesan, Hershey's milk chocolate, your underarm, or a dark craft chocolate bar? It's definitely in a Hershey's milk chocolate. They add it. By the way, basically, butyric acid is the stuff that smells slightly rancid, because it's basically what gets produced when milk goes off. And for reasons which we'll go into at another point, Hershey still adds it to their milk chocolate. But of course, none of it would be in any of Philip's bars or any other craft chocolate bar. See if anyone remembered what we talked about earlier on, or maybe not. Sweetness, astringency, bitterness, or umami, which is not a taste. One of them is a trigeminal sensation. And if you want to know more about this one, well done, everybody got astringency. It's definitely a taste, as is sweetness and bitterness. We did talk about those earlier, but we didn't talk about astringency because we didn't have any 100%. Right. Philip showed you a certain number of these amazing principles, which we love. Did he have 3, 5, 8, or 10?
Moses. I say Moses.
I think you might be right. Although if you count them, that's different. Well done, everybody got 10. 10 out of 10 for you guys. Right, let's see how you all did. Masha, you did very, very well. Provided you don't work for Original Beans or Cocoa Runners, we will send you lots more craft chocolate. Whoever Masha is, you've got the right crown. Right.
Wow. You!
Just basically, as Philip sort of said, read the label, don't buy, you get amazing, you get equivalent of like 50 to 100 pounds worth of wine when you spend, anything from the £4 to the £6 on one of Philip's bars, and slightly more if we have to bring one from America. Cook with, Philip's amazing chocolate. It's just brilliant. Always have 2 chocolates on the go. Join our service, buy more Original Beans. Right, I'm going to basically now move to the Q&A. And Philip, thank you so much. I think we probably got about 10 minutes worth of Q&A. That's what we said we would do.
Super, yep.
Right. Can you see them, Philip? Do you want me
to? In the chat, in the Q&A, huh?
Yeah, they're in the Q&A. I'm going to stop the share and see if I can be very sophisticated.
I had the Q&A here, so, you don't necessarily... What is your favorite choice of chocolate from tonight and so forth? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with, I think we should probably start with the top.
Yeah.
Catherine from Cocoa Encounters. Advantage of traceability. Does the organic system impact on the profitability of the farmer and the supply chain? Great question. Do you want to answer that?
Yes. So organic actually pays a premium that is comparable to fair trade. So in other words, fair trade pays us 5 to 10% on top of the world market price, and about the same amount is paid in organic certification. So you could, and many farmers in Latin America, where the cooperative systems are relatively well developed, they actually use both certifications together to sort of come to 400 or so as premium. So it does add the same amount of money in a farmer's pockets as fair trade does. Nirmal Nandvani Is it right to think that chocolate should be kept in the fridge for best results?
Only if you're in a
I,
very,
I
very
see
hot
you. I
place,
see.
or you've got a
Yes.
wine fridge.
So, so it's a butter product, and so the beauty of cacao butter is, of course, it melts slightly under body temperature, and this is where we want it to have in order to get all the flavors and all, the full texture. So keeping it in the fridge and then taking it out, you could, in the hottest of, if you don't have air conditioning, the hottest of summer, put it in the fridge. But certainly if you want to enjoy it, you have to take it out and get it to just normal room temperature.
Well, and
What? Yeah.
The reason why Philip is absolutely right on this stuff is because of basically, and one of the Swiss did lots of things for chocolate, but there's a bloke who's responsible for the Toblerone called John Tobler, who worked out basically the principles of tempering, which is what Philip's meaning with it being a butter product and the different crystal structures. The problem with putting it in a fridge is that you will basically change the temper of the chocolate. So when you bring it out, sometimes when you snap it, you'll have moved it from crystal structure 5 to crystal structure 6. Come to one of our virtual Welcome to the Revolutions and we'll tell you more. Bonnie, you, what is your favorite choice of chocolate from tonight? So I think that the dodge answer that I will give is it depends which wine I'm going to have it with. Philip, over to you.
I think this is exactly it. No, but I mean, every chocolate, I think for me, certainly if I know them well, has a mood, has a groove to it. So, the Virunga to me is earthy. The Pura is very bright, and there are moments in the morning. Pura in the morning is just too strong for me. It's a too big grand dame kind of. The brightness is too bright for me in the morning. So I prefer a Benny or a milder sort of slightly vivid chocolate. So I really move. And then of course there are moments where you need a kick, and you might go to a higher percentage chocolate because in the afternoon when you're down, you just get yourself the theobromine and the caffeine to get yourself a kick, and that will probably last for a few hours. And it's maybe better than coffee, and definitely better than a sugar rush.
Question from Mark Grassi, and Mark, we're looking forward to talking to you. I think we're actually doing a private chocolate tasting.
This is Mark.
So we can do more on this one. So basically, Philip, you are an inspiration. Agreed. If you had a magic wand to make more chocolate sustainable, would you improve traceability, ensure farmers are paid more, or make chocolate organic? Or you're allowed to have an other or all of the above, I think.
There's a wonderful documentation, the best documentation of the cacao sector. That's called the Cocoa Barometer. Please write it up. Cacao Barometer. Google it. The 2020, it is published every 2 years. The 2020 just came out this week. It has lots of graphs. You can flip through it and understand everything about cacao, and really everything needs to be done. But if there is one thing, if you really would nail me down to one thing, it's payment. It's what Spencer said. You can talk long and short about it. We need to pay more for the product. And this is what we are all into. In the moment we are enjoying more with less, it actually, I think we slowly get prepared to pay those amounts, which is, £1, £1.50, £2, £3. It's not, it's not fortunes. It's still affordable, and it changes everything.
Yeah. So I think basically making it into a specialty product like wine is, or like coffee is, or like, even beer is, if we basically can get people to pay for flavor, it will definitely help. So Philip, there's a couple of questions for you, which is basically your proudest conservation achievement through original beans.
It's hard to say, but if you really, again, if you would ask me one, then I think it's all the work we've done in Virunga. It's Congo, Eastern Congo is such a difficult place. There's war. There's Ebola. It's very hard to imagine the time travel. You go 200, 300 years back in time in terms of material culture, and it's so difficult with everything. And at the same time, it's such a beautiful place. That people are beautiful, and just to see if you provide, and we are a tiny company, and if you do something different, if you provide an opportunity, the way people grab it, make something out of it, and the spin-off now, the FAM de Virunga is like, since 5 years we have a women project. The first cacao cooperative in the women, a female cacao cooperative has emerged from that. It's amazing what can come out if you just change the game. So I think that's the one that I'm proudest of all. most inspired by myself.
Question about the proportion of components, cocoa, cane sugar, milk, etc., get decided by trial or error. Maybe you should give the story about how Falkland eventually caved in and allowed you to produce a 42% milk chocolate.
I mean, I think so. For us, of course, there's always, if you look at the range, we want to sort of have a full range from white to 100%. But there's something about if expressing the true nature of a bean, and this is actually the fruit. So you pick that fruit and you taste it, and then essentially that's what you sort of want to translate. And the fruit taste is complex; it's really complex. But there is a character, and that character we want to translate. So if like the Beni, which we didn't taste this evening, but sort of has a slightly sweet core in its fruitiness, then you want to keep is we add a bit more sugar. In fact, the couscous is an interesting one because we turned it around. We said we want to make a 100% chocolate with only one ingredient, which is cacao. So no added cacao butter, nothing, which means it needs to taste interesting, and the viscosity, the melt needs to be comparable, even though we don't add anything, to it at 100%. And so we need to look for a cacao that A, was interesting in terms of its flavor profile, but B, had more fat by nature. And the chuncho, which we talked about, has about 5% more by nature as a varietal. And so we can use it. So this is, the making the recipes is really understanding the bean. And then we have a team effort. It's tasting the bean and tasting, and there's samples and samples. And then finally you stand at the machine, you go for a roast profile, and then conching is the final step. It's sort of refinement. And you can still change a lot. And we literally, for 16 hours, we are next to the conch, and we taste and taste and taste. And then there's this moment when you say, okay, this is the best. And then you leave it. But it's a constant sort of, team effort. Is that why chocolate from India doesn't melt as much? No, I think that's just the maker. And so essentially the cacao, I would imagine, has the same kind of fat to solid content.
There's two issues though. There is an issue with mass-produced cacao in places like Australia and India, where they do actually add various substances to stop it melting. I mean, the classic is PGP.
Oh yeah, of course. Oh yeah, sorry, industrial chocolate. Yes, of course they do. So there will be fats like, palm oil is still used in a lot of confectionery because it gives you a higher stability of the product. So if you go to craft makers like us and others, if you take our chocolate in winter, the butter gets pretty stiff. You need quite some time. That's the fridge thing. You need quite some time to get it actually sort of melted, and then it starts opening. If you have palm oil, which is catastrophic for forests and in many ways, then it's more homogeneous in texture, and that's what is used in lots of.
Right. Naira Salanda from the Amsterdam. Naira, you want to know about where to buy unique organic cocoa beans and cocoa butter from. I think we'll just introduce you to Original Beans.
Exactly.
There are a couple of other players.
Great.
They would be your best place, especially for the cocoa butter. Got that one. Miguel, you've got a very tough question here about, in Brazil, Colombia, farmers being threatened with death if they report abuses when organic and fair trade controls are carried out. How can you trust the organic institutions there?
Miguel, I'm not sure where you get this information from. I've witnessed organic certification in many places by now. We have 8 supply chains, all of them are organic certified, and I've never seen anything or heard that we source from Colombia, from Bolivia, from Ecuador, from the Congo, from Tanzania. And to the contrary, my experience has been that I'm just amazed that somewhere in the remotest areas of the world, there are still auditors, trained auditors who travel there to Congo, to the inner of the Bolivian Amazon, with to control the sheets that the farmers have filled in, and write a report and figure out. And for instance, in Ecuador, we've had an issue. We didn't get certified because there were some fields, neighboring fields, where they had used in the village, they had used mosquito spray. And there were residues they found in some of the cacaos of this mosquito thing. And so my experience is not
I think though that there is a sad tendency in the whole of the world at the moment whereby to me the most fearful thing is the way that journalists are getting threatened. So we have that one. Veronica has got a question about basically how do we get people to treat chocolate as a specialty product and pay more? So I have a theory on this one. Do you want to go first, Philip, or do you want
No. You are doing this every day. You're hosting it. You're the great host of exactly the answer to this question.
So I don't know whether it's the only answer to it or not, but I think that one of the key things to think about is that actually you need an occasion, and you need to get people to think about it slightly differently. I think one of the advantages that craft beer has had and specialty coffee's had, that actually, if you want to be cool, when you go to a pub now, you don't order a boring old brand beer. You basically try and order a punk IPA or something else like that. And it's a relatively simple upgrade. Similarly, if you want to have a meeting with somebody, if you want to impress them, you don't go to no disrespect to Starbucks or to Costas, but you don't go there. You go to a nice specialty coffee store. With craft chocolate, basically, we're not a straight substitute for a Mars bar. We're not really even a substitute. Esmeralda's is not really a substitute for a dairy milk either. I think you need a different occasion. And I think in some ways, the best parallel is what happens in the cheese industry. So if you go back to our parents' or grandparents' generation, at least in the UK, cheese was something which we basically had for tea, and it basically came out of tins or out of wax balls, or it came out of tubes, and you had it between two bits of bread. The idea of specialty craft cheese was, yes, if you lived next to Wensleydale, you had some really good cheese there, you might have thought slightly differently about it. But what really changed it was actually the idea of cheese boards, which we all now all think is sort of fairly common and fairly average. But in the UK, what really happened with cheese boards was Neil's Yard working with the likes of Sally Clark. And I think what we need to do is to actually find the right occasion to savor chocolate. And, just on this, if you look at when people eat mass-produced confectionery, they have it in the mornings and they have it especially in the afternoons, and it's for a reward, it's for a pickup. If you look at when people savor craft chocolate, it's actually in the evenings for a lot of people. I mean, there obviously are people who have it for breakfast, there are people who have it in the afternoon all the time, but often what people will do is they'll have it instead of dessert, they'll have it instead of pudding. So I think we have to do a bit more on that. Philip, over to you. I think we've probably got time for one more question.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I didn't want to add to this here. It's so clear. I wanted to briefly acknowledge Miguel, who says, I saw myself in person, the threat to farmers with death if they report abuses when organic and fair trade controls are happening. I'm sad to hear. I'm glad I haven't experienced it, and I totally acknowledge that you have a different experience, and let's hope that that's not the general and the exception to a rule. So
yeah, but the one thing I will say, Miguel, is that if you look at chocolate's history, we should take a little bit of encouragement from some things which have happened in history to go back to journalists. So everybody thinks that Cadbury's is this amazing paragon of virtue in the chocolate world, but actually if you look at the history back in the 1880s 1890s when they're building Bourneville, they're also using child slave labor in Sao Tome and Principe, which is where they're getting 70% of their cacao from. But because of some amazing journalists who are very brave, they do actually, there is eventually a consumer movement which ends up with them basically abandoning Sao Tome because they're so embarrassed about it. The bad news is they then move to Ghana and West Africa and put up supply chains which are even more opaque. But that just means that it can be done. We just have to double down and do it better. Great question about climate change. Philip, you're going to know the answer to this one better to me. My understanding is you really need rainforest to grow cacao. Maybe not clone cacao, but you basically need rainforest and quite a lot of water.
Yeah, so you need a tropical belt, but of course the latitudes are shifting. So there's no doubt about it that latitude and also height is changing as temperatures rise. So we've already seen that cacao, which is a low altitude crop, is moving up slowly, following coffee, which is also moving up. So these things are definitely changing. In how far parts of Chile will become tropical, I don't dare to say. But I have a friend in London who planted a garden a few years ago and asked a friend of his from Kew Gardens. He wanted to plant a garden for 100 years, so he asked a friend of the Kew Gardens to help him, and they planted olive trees for the next 100 years outside of London. So there will be changes, and I of course, with these kind of with this particular industry, with the cacao, with the way in which it is grown by nature, the way we are appreciating and enjoying it, we can really make a difference. And if we would change the whole of the chocolate industry, which is, I believe, possible because it's such an obvious win-win, we could make a big contribution to, slowing climate change, in addition to all the other good effects it would have. So, last word on this. Thanks a lot for all the time, and for Cocoa Runners, Spencer. Thanks for.
No, Philip, thank you so much for everything you've done tonight, but also over the last many years in the world of craft chocolate. That was absolutely fantastic. Nicola, write to us separately and we'll answer your question. Anybody else has any other questions, we will definitely answer you. But Philip, I cannot thank you enough for everything you've done, and your team,
Likewise.
Everybody, Nina, Vera, everyone, that you are always brilliant fun to be with, always just great. And live the revolution. And thank you very much. I wish everybody very, very safe and happy and secure Christmas. So thank you all very, very much. I am going to end it here, I think, and wish you all good night. Thank you very, very much.